Ye Tian crawled from his grave after 3 classmates buried him alive. A hidden system rewarded his second life with SSS Raging Divine Flame. Its awakening summoned a white fire dragon across Bright City's sky. The dragon entered Ye Tian and instantly healed every fatal injury. Then the system marked all 3 attackers as first revenged. Target. Killing them would unlock 100 times cultivation speed. Ye Tian tested the flame, and one white dragon erased a boulder. With proof, he headed back to school to collect every debt. The memories attached to that body arrived fully, only after Ye Tian escaped the burial site. The memories arriving with that body explained that Ye Tian had transmigrated into a parallel-walled water blue star. In his previous life, he had built an enormous business empire from nothing and learned how power protected people who possessed it. This new world was harsher. The cause was simple. Spiritual energy had returned, and martial artists stood above ordinary law and ordinary social status. Every adult could attempt a talent awakening, then use that ability to cultivate and compete for martial arts universities. Talent ranks stretched from the weakest grades to SSS, with each higher rank usually deciding a person's future ceiling. Bright City had millions of residents, yet even S-rank talents were rare enough to become city summitsets. An SSS talent had not appeared for centuries. So Ye Tian originally expected something much more ordinary from his new life. Before the system appeared, simply surviving long enough to reach the awakening ceremony had already seemed uncertain. The previous owner of this body had been a kind student preparing for the National Martial Arts examination. 3 wealthy classmates from the same elite training camp had taken him into the wilderness, beaten him, and buried him alive. They even smashed his phone and stole the small amount of money still attached to it before leaving him underground. Those memories left Ye Tian furious. The reason was that the victim had done nothing that justified being treated as disposable entertainment. He decided that ordinary compensation would never settle an attempted murder followed by a burial meant to hide the evidence. The system arrived while Ye Tian was still trying to stand on a broken leg with blood running from his head. Its beginner gift opened into Raging Divine Flame, instantly replacing desperation with an advantage no one around him could imagine. The white dragon in the sky was visible from Bright City, drawing powerful martial artists toward the wilderness. Those experts assumed some legendary treasure had descended and began racing toward the phenomenon before anyone knew the truth. By the time they arrived, Ye Tian had already left with the real treasure living inside his body. The system warned that Raging Divine Flame would grow stronger as his cultivation increased instead of remaining fixed at its starting power. That made cultivation resources immediately valuable, because every breakthrough could strengthen both Ye Tian and his SSS talent together. He still needed to complete the official awakening ceremony before the world would recognize him as a proper awakener. More importantly, he needed the 3 killers to see the person they buried walking back through the training camp doors. Ye Tian swore that none of them would receive an easy escape after what they did to the original body's owner. The moment he finished that oath, the body's lingering resentment finally faded, and his soul synchronized completely with it. That emotional release triggered the system's first mission and revealed the 100 times cultivation speed reward waiting behind revenge. Ye Tian did not need extra motivation, yet the reward ensured vengeance would also become the foundation of his future strength. He climbed out of the burial site and headed toward Bright City's first training camp without cleaning away the blood or mud. The first training camp was the best of the city's training facilities, filled with wealthy heirs and unusually talented students. Ye Tian had entered through his own results rather than family influence, which made his popularity there harder for privileged classmates to dismiss. Back at the camp, one student was already more worried about his absence than anyone else. Ye Tian, a beautiful girl admired throughout the school, kept staring through the classroom window, waiting for Ye Tian to return. Most students knew she liked him openly, even though he had repeatedly refused to date while concentrating on his studies. Her friend explained that Ye Tian had last been seen leaving with Wang Chong, Lu Yuan, and Zhang Xia. All 3 boys had returned to class. Yet Ye Tian had not, and their calm explanations did not match the situation. Ye Tian immediately decided she would go looking for him if he failed to return before the awakening ceremony. Her worry had another reason. The reason was that those 3 boys were known bullies whose families protected them from ordinary consequences. Inside another classroom, Wang Chong, Lu Yuan, and Zhang Xia were pretending nothing unusual had happened. Traces of blood remained on their clothing, Yet nobody approached closely enough to question the three wealthy troublemakers. Their private conversation revealed that fear had already started replacing the excitement they felt after burying Ye Tian. One asked whether killing a classmate could actually bring consequences if the body was eventually discovered. Another argued that nobody knew what happened, and their families possessed enough influence to make problems disappear. Instead of remorse, the three gradually convinced themselves that getting away with murder proved how untouchable they were. Their arrogance went so far that they joked about finding more ordinary students to hurt after graduation for the thrill of it. That conversation ended when almost everyone near the windows suddenly began looking toward the training camp grounds. A classmate said Ye Tian was downstairs, completely covered in blood and dried clay. The three rushed to the window. That mattered because that statement contradicted the body they had personally left under the earth. Ye Tian looked upward at almost the same moment, meeting the eyes of all three killers from the courtyard below. Lu Yuan collapsed backward first, unable to understand how someone buried alive could be staring directly at him. Wang Chong froze beside him, while Jiang Xia visibly trembled, despite trying to keep his expression controlled. Around them, other students only saw a popular classmate, returning in a condition that looked horrifying. Nobody yet knew exactly who caused the injuries. Still, the blood and mud made ordinary playground gossip turn serious immediately. Students leaned from windows, asking whether Ye Tian had been attacked. Meanwhile, several girls openly worried about his condition. Ye Tian reached the window and started crying when she saw how much blood covered the person she had been waiting for. The three killers understood that every second Ye Tian remained visible increased anxiousness their secret would collapse publicly. They still tried convincing themselves that family money would matter more than whatever an ordinary student could accuse them of doing. Ye Tian, meanwhile, walked through the camp calmly because showing the injuries was part of his first move against them. He wanted instructors, students, and visiting officials to see the evidence before the wealthy families could rewrite the story. Several instructors soon arrived after hearing that a blood-covered student had returned immediately before awakening. Ye Tian's instructor, Manhwa, reacted with genuine concern and asked who had injured him so badly. Ye Tian named Wang Shang, Lu Yuan, and Jiang Xia without hesitation, then explained the attack and burial from beginning to end. The instructors listened in silence as the situation changed from school bullying into a deliberate attempt to kill another student. One female instructor openly called the three boys beasts for beating someone nearly dead and then burying him outside the city. Manhwa agreed that ordinary fights were one matter. Still, attempted murder demanded a completely different response. Another instructor suggested contacting the families, then remembered all three students were about to graduate from the training camp. That made school discipline almost meaningless unless someone with greater authority decided to pursue the case beyond campus. Several teachers offered to get Ye Tian medical treatment and clean clothes before the ceremony began. Ye Tian refused both offers. The cause was simple. His system had already healed the real damage, and the visible blood served a purpose. The instructors worried that leaving him like this would create a massive scandal. Meanwhile, senior officials were already visiting for Awakening Day. One teacher finally admitted the uncomfortable truth. The three attackers came from families powerful enough to resist ordinary punishment. If Ye Tian were an unknown student with no future potential, public outrage alone might not overcome those connections. Ye Tian did not argue. The cause was simple. He had returned specifically to see whether the adults around him would choose fairness or convenience both us. He learned that Manhwa genuinely cared. Meanwhile, several others were more afraid of the consequences of letting the incident become public. Even so, none of them denied what the three attackers had done or tried to blame Ye Tian for creating trouble. That was enough information for Ye Tian. Before the awakening ceremony changed every power calculation in the building. News of the burial spread quickly from classroom to classroom while Ye Tian headed toward the three attackers herself. She entered their class, walked straight toward them, and slapped each boy before allowing any explanation. Ye Tian told them she knew they had injured Ye Tian and buried him alive after taking him outside the training camp. The room erupted because many students were hearing the accusation clearly for the first time. Jiang Xia claimed the entire thing had only been rough play. Still, Ye Tian's blood-covered appearance made that excuse impossible to believe. Ye Tian answered that casual had not leave someone buried underground, with injuries severe enough to look half dead. The three boys then shifted the argument toward jealousy, accused Ye Tian of manipulating Ye Tian, even though he kept rejecting her. Ye Tian made her own position clear. Liking Ye Tian was her decision, and his refusal to date did not give anyone permission to hurt him. Each of the three admitted that he had pursued her for years, hoping persistence and family background would eventually change her mind. Tian rejected all three again and told them her feelings remained with Ye Tian regardless of whether he accepted them. That humiliation mattered because jealousy over Tian had helped turn their resentment toward Ye Tian into violence. By the time she left the classroom, the three attackers had lost control of both their secret and the social story surrounding it. Students no longer saw them as wealthy troublemakers who could laugh off another fight. They saw three people accused of leaving a classmate underground to die. Ye Tian returned to his own classroom still covered in blood, refusing the spare uniform waiting for him. His classmates stared because the cheerful student they remembered now carried the physical evidence of an attempted murder. Ye Tian did not deliver a dramatic speech. He simply waited for Awakening Day to place real power behind the accusation. Bright City maintained 20 training camps, but the first training camp held the strongest reputation. Wealthy families sent children there. This was because better instructors and stronger peers improved examination results. Talented students without powerful backgrounds could also enter through performance, which was how Ye Tian earned his place. That mattered socially because classmates knew he had reached the elite campus without anyone buying the opportunity for him. His appearance and easygoing personality made him unusually popular before the burial changed his life. Tian stood out even in that environment. She wore her hair in a high ponytail, had bright eyes, and drew attention everywhere she went. Most boys considered her unreachable, especially because her family background exceeded nearly everyone else's. Her connection to City Lord Shi Chong made the three attackers' obsession with her even more politically useful to their families. Zhang Xia, Lu Yuan, and Wang Chong had all pursued her for years. Their parents quietly encouraged that pursuit. That mattered because her into Shi Tian's family could improve their own standing. Shi Tian ignored those calculations and continued focusing on Ye Tian instead. She had already confessed to him more than once. Ye Tian had turned her down without insulting her, saying he wanted to concentrate on studying before thinking about dating. That refusal never stopped Shi Tian from waiting for him. It also made the three wealthy admirers resent a boy who appeared to reject what they wanted most. When Ye Tian returned from the wilderness, the training camp's social hierarchy stopped protecting the attackers immediately. His blood-covered appearance gave every rumor a visible piece of evidence. Even students who had never spoken to him closely understood that the injuries were too serious for ordinary roughhousing. The instructors first tried to solve the practical problems around him. They offered immediate medical treatment before the awakening ceremony began. They prepared clean replacement clothes. Because of that, Ye Tian could change quickly. They wanted him cleaned up before senior officials saw the situation. Ye Tian refused because the stains documented what happened better than another argument ever could. One instructor warned that creating a public scandal might still fail against three families with local influence. That warning was not meant as approval of the attackers. It reflected how often ordinary victims lost when martial artist households controlled money, lawyers, and connections. Chun Hua reacted differently from the administrators focused on appearances. He cared more about whether Ye Tian could stand, think clearly, and survive Awakening Day. That concern made Ye Tian trust his instructor more than the officials who mainly feared embarrassment. When the school leadership reviewed the incident, several administrators initially described it as mutual student conflict. Chunhua objected to that wording. The cause was simple. One side had been beaten unconscious and buried outside the city. He argued that restraint should not fall only on the victim. The reason was that the aggressors had stronger families. The principal then asked for Ye Tian's background in detail. The answer about Ye Tian's family was painfully simple. His parents were already gone, leaving him without family backing. His household contained no martial artists. He survived with limited support and his own training results. By comparison, every attacker came from a family with money and martial connections. That contrast explained why some administrators expected compensation rather than criminal consequences. One dean suggested placing instructors near Zhang Xia during the awakening ceremony. He feared Ye Tian might retaliate once emotions rose. Chunhua thought the arrangement looked absurd after the school had failed to prevent the original attack. The principal finally decided everyone should wait for the awakening results before making permanent decisions. That choice showed exactly how much talent could influence justice in this world. The students understood balance, even without hearing every administrative conversation. As rumors spread across the playground, several openly said silence today would make everyone vulnerable tomorrow. One student spat at the three attackers. Another student followed by spitting at the attackers as well. Soon, the wealthy boys were being cursed by people who normally avoided provoking them. Zhang Xia tried reminding everyone that this was still the first training camp, and fighting could bushun unch. The crowd answered that burying someone alive deserved more than angry words. Ye Tian never asked the students to surround them. Their reaction came from seeing how far privileged classmates had gone without remorse. The public pressure rattled Lu Yuan and Wang Chong. Zhang Xia remained the most confident. The cause was simple. He believed awakening talent would replace the scandal with a better story. He told the other two that a strong result could make families and teachers protect them again. That belief was one reason Ye Tian wanted his own awakening to happen in front of everyone. Ye Tian tested before him and lit 7 positions on the stone. The result confirmed an A-rank talent. Students cheered because a rank already represented a future far above ordinary awakeners. City officials immediately paid closer attention to her. Ye Tian's turn followed while the same blood and clay still covered his clothes. The ordinary awakening stone could not withstand the power moving through it. Its failure created confusion before anyone understood what the explosion meant. A senior instructor remembered a similar incident from 10 years earlier. That earlier student had awakened S rank and later became one of Bright City's strongest figures. The comparison instantly changed the mood around Ye Tian's broken stone. Instead of laughing about equipment failure, leaders began wondering whether Bright City had produced another S-rank talent. The training camp kept a higher-grade awakening stone precisely for situations normal equipment could not measure. It had not been needed for roughly a decade. Several instructors hurried to retrieve it from storage. Before they returned, the administrator responsible for expenses raised another problem. The broken testing stone had been worth roughly $500,000. He asked whether Ye Tian should compensate the school for destroying it. Ye Tian answered that a student using equipment correctly should not pay because the device failed to handle the test. He also explained that his household could not produce anything close to that amount. The principal ended the discussion before it became more embarrassing. He said Ye Tian owed nothing if his talent had simply exceeded the stone's capacity. Then he joked that an S-rank result would make the destroyed equipment completely irrelevant. Ye Tian calmly asked what would happen if the advanced test showed SSS instead. The room fell quiet because the question sounded serious, even though the rank belonged more to textbooks than living memory. The principal eventually answered with humor. If Ye Tian truly awakened SSS, he could blow up the entire training camp and still receive praise for the noise. Nobody around him actually expected that joke to become relevant. City Lord Shi Chong watched Ye Tian more carefully than the others. He had enough experience to know calm confidence sometimes came from information nobody else was possessed. When the advanced stone arrived, the atmosphere around the stage became completely different. Students stopped joking once the advanced testing equipment appeared. Instructors moved closer to watch the measurement with their own eyes. Seniors leaders watched every light on the device. The result would decide whether the first explosion was a strange accident or the beginning of something historic. When the students assembled outside for awakening, Ye Tian's condition made the accusation impossible to hide inside classrooms anymore. Rumors spread across the playground that Jingxia, Lu Yuan, and Wang Chong had beaten him and buried him alive. Students who normally ignored rich family conflicts began asking what kind of people could leave a classmate underground to die. The 3 attackers insisted their families would protect them and that public outrage would disappear once better talents awakened. Zhang Xia argued that only an S-rank result could give Ye Tian enough value to make powerful adults choose his side. Wang Chong laughed that Bright City had not produced an S-rank talent in years and treated that possibility as fantasy. Their confidence weakened when angry students surrounded them. Before the ceremony even began, classmates spat at the 3, called them a disgrace to the training camp, and refused to accept the incident as harmless fighting. Ye Tian thanked the people defending him. However, he did not join the shouting, because the real reversal was still minutes away. Senior leaders soon arrived, and immediately noticed the blood-covered student standing among otherwise clean awakening candidates. City Lord Shichong, the principal, deans, and instructors were already on site. That mattered because Awakening Day determined Bright City's next generation. The principal questioned why Ye Tian had not gone to the infirmary and received an uncomfortable summary of the attempted burial. Chunhua explained that Ye Tian came from an ordinary household. Meanwhile, the three attackers had martial artists inside influential families. Several leaders recognized the political problem at once and began discussing how far the training camp could legally intervene. One dean wanted instructors positioned nearby. That meant Ye Tian could not attack Zhang Xia during the emotionally charged ceremony. Chunhua objected that the school seemed more prepared to restrain the victim than punish the people who nearly killed him. That criticism exposed the same imbalance Ye Tian had already noticed before any talent results changed his value. A leader admitted that if Ye Tian awakened nothing exceptional, compensation might be the most realistic outcome the school could force. Ye Tian listened without begging for protection and said there was no need to debate the issue before his awakening. Chunhua urged him once more to seek treatment. Still, Ye Tian quietly revealed that his injuries had already healed. Then he told his instructor to be mentally prepared for the result he expected to produce. Chunhua joked that only an S-rank talent could truly force the entire administration to change its attitude. Ye Tian asked what would happen if the result were SSS instead, making the instructor laugh because the rank sounded impossible. Chunhua answered that an SSS awakening would make the principal smile more humbly than Ye Tian had ever seen. The ceremony continued, and Ye Tian's own awakening confirmed. She possessed an excellent A-rank talent. Her result already placed her among the most promising young people in Bright City. Then Ye Tian stepped toward the ordinary awakening stone. During that moment, blood and clay still covered his clothing. The moment his hand touched the device, power surged through it beyond anything the stone had been built to measure. The awakening stone exploded before producing a normal final result. Students laughed in shock at first because none of them had ever seen a testing device break during an awakening. Some joked that Ye Tian had gained a story he could brag about forever even if his actual talent were ordinary. Then smarter students remembered the stone had already flashed more lights than expected before failing completely. They realized the explosion might mean the device could not measure Ye Tian's talent, rather than that the awakening had failed. The instructors reached the same conclusion and stopped treating the shattered stone like an equipment accident. An advanced awakening stone existed for rare high-level talents, yet bringing it out would cost the training camp heavily if damaged. One administrator tried charging Ye Tian for the broken device, despite the obvious fact that he had only followed instructions. Ye Tian calmly refused because he had almost no money and had not intentionally destroyed school property. The principal stepped in, deciding that a possible top-tier awakening mattered far more than the price of one ruined stone. He told Ye Tian that no payment would be required if the next test confirmed an extraordinary result. Ye Tian asked whether that promise would still apply if the result reached SSS. Several leaders laughed again, but City Lord Shichong watched Ye Tian more carefully than the others. The City Lord had awakened an A-rank talent himself and eventually cultivated to a level where he governed millions of residents. That experience made him understand how violently a truly legendary result could change both Ye Tian's life and Bright City's status. He also recognized why Ye Tian still wore bloody clothing after hearing what the three attackers had done. Chong promised the matter would be handled fairly and told the training camp to stop treating Ye Tian like the source of the problem. A much larger awakening stone was carried onto the stage, under the attention of every student and official present. Ye Tian placed his hand against the advanced device without any dramatic speech. One light appeared, then another, continuing upward until all 10 positions burned at once. A white flame symbol formed beside the result, with the name Raging Divine Flame. For several seconds, the people closest to the stage simply stared. This was because the impossible rank was sitting directly in front of them. An instructor finally shouted that Ye Tian had awakened SSS talent, breaking the silence across the entire playground. The principal pushed through the crowd, confirmed the 10 lights personally, and nearly lost his composure from excitement. An SSS awakening had not appeared for centuries, and it had happened inside his own training camp during his tenure. Students who had just debated whether Ye Tian could reach S rank now realized they had witnessed something far beyond that. The same flood-covered victim everyone pitied minutes earlier had suddenly become Brai's most valuable young martial talent. Ye Tian stood frozen because her excellent A-rank awakening now looked tiny beside the legendary result. Her friend reminded her that Ye Tian's talent did not erase her own value or the feelings she had already shown him. the three attackers reacted very differently. This was because the one outcome they had treated as impossible had actually happened. Jiang Xia's face went pale when he realized family influence could no longer outweigh Ye Tian's future potential. Lu Yuan and Wang Cheng understood the same thing and immediately began thinking about escape rather than pride. Ye Tian looked toward them once from the stage, and that single glance made all three understand the revenge had not been forgotten. Before anyone could process the result fully, another heavenly phenomenon formed above the training camp. The sky whitened, and the same enormous fire dragon manifested over Ye Tian in front of thousands of witnesses. City Lord Shichong ordered security around the stage. The cause was simple. Nobody knew whether the phenomenon represented danger, treasure, or outside interference. Ye Tian remained calm because he recognized the dragon as the physical manifestation of Raging Divine Flame. The white dragon descended directly toward him. At the same time, instructors prepared to protect the student they believed might be under attack. Ye Tian told them not to interfere, then stood beneath the dragon as blazing energy entered his body again. White flame flashed through his eyes. In parallel, the transformation forced his physical cultivation upward at extraordinary speed. When the phenomenon ended, Ye Tian had reached the legendary 10th level of body, tempering immediately after awakening. Most new awakeners needed time simply to understand their abilities. Yet Ye Tian had already reached a level many students never touched. The training camp erupted again, because SSS talent was one miracle and instant body tempering completion was another. City Lord Shichong became even more serious about security. After realizing Ye Tian's potential could attract enemies as quickly as allies, he promised to report the awakening to higher authorities and request rewards worthy of the strongest talent Bright City had ever produced. Ye Tian answered that cultivation resources mattered more to him than ceremony or empty praise. Shichong appreciated the directness and arranged a temporary protector immediately. The assigned bodyguard was Director Su, head of Bright City's security bureau, and a martial spirit-level martial artist. Students stared because a figure powerful enough to dominate ordinary city conflicts had been assigned to guard one newly awakened teenager. Ye Tian accepted without pretending he no longer needed protection, simply because the system had made him stronger. He knew public SSS talent could motivate organizations to recruit him, yet it could also motivate enemies to kill him before he matured. The principal informed Ye Tian that the National Awakening authorities had already been contacted about his result. Higher-level organizations would decide additional rewards. The reason was that the training camp had never prepared a package for someone at SSS rank. The principal guaranteed that whatever Ye Tian received would exceed every reward previously offered by the school. Ye Tian told him the amount did not need to sound impressive. It simply needed to help him cultivate faster. That answer reinforced a pattern the adults were beginning to notice. Ye Tian valued usable strength more than status displays. The principal then explained that the normal martial arts examination might no longer be necessary for him. Ordinary applicants competed for universities. Even so, an SSS talent would reverse that relationship and force universities to compete for Ye Tian. Representatives from the country's strongest martial arts schools would likely travel to Bright City personally. Ye Tian welcomed that outcome. The cause was simple. Competition between schools could translate directly into more cultivation resources. The principal offered to send people to the three attackers' homes and negotiate apologies and compensation. Ye Tian refused politely because money from their parents would not complete the system mission or settle the body's resentment. He said he would handle the revenge himself. During that moment, Director Su and the school focused only on preventing outside interference. The adults understood what he meant when Ye Tian left the stage and walked directly toward Jiang Xia. Students nearby moved aside because the difference between the two boys' positions had changed completely within a single ceremony. Jiang Xia shouted that Ye Tian could not attack him publicly just. This was because he awakened a rare talent. Ye Tian answered with a slap that sent teeth and blood across the ground before Jiang Xia finished the argument. The strength behind that single strike shocked students who still believed Ye Tian was merely a talented beginner. Body tempering 10th level gave him physical power far beyond the average student standing around the playground. Jiang Xia tried fighting back through pain, but Ye Tian caught him easily and refused to let the revenge become another one-sided excuse. He reminded everyone that Jiang Xia had already beaten the original Ye Tian nearly to death before burying him alive. The difference now was that the victim finally possessed enough strength to decide what happened next. The Advanced Awakening Stone answered the question immediately. 10 lights meant the scale had reached its maximum. The white flame symbol beside them identified Raging Divine Flame as Ye Tian's talent. Teachers who had spent careers discussing legendary ranks were suddenly standing beside one. The principal's excitement became so obvious that students started joking. He looked less composed than Ye Tian. Several leaders were already imagining promotions, simply because an SSS awakening had happened during their tenure. Students below the stage compared Ye Tian's calm expression with the adults almost dancing around him. Ye Tian felt proud first, then unexpectedly insecure. Her A rank result had seemed extraordinary only minutes earlier. Now the distance between A rank and SSS felt impossible to ignore. Her friend teased that family background and persistence still gave her reasons not to surrender. Ye Tian blushed, but the deeper concern was whether Ye Tian's future would carry him far beyond Bright City. Zhang Xia's concern was much simpler. He understood that the person he tried to kill had just become more valuable than everyone protecting his family. He secretly messaged Lu and Wangchong to warn them. Neither reply offered a solution. All three had built their confidence around Ye Tian, remaining ordinary. That entire foundation of confidence had disappeared in one afternoon. Before they could plan anything else, daylight above the camp changed again. Clouds and color gave way to the same pale supernatural brilliance Ye Tian had seen over the burial site. The roar of a dragon rolled across the training ground. A massive white fire dragon appeared above the students. Armed personnel around City Lord Shichong reacted immediately. Soldiers moved into protective positions. School leaders crowded around Ye Tian. The adults assumed a heavenly phenomenon appearing after an SSS awakening might attract enemies or uncontrolled energy. Shichong personally pulled Ye Tian backward. He told the student not to worry. The cause was simple. The city would protect him. Ye Tian recognized the dragon instead. He had already seen Raging Divine Flame take that exact form when the system healed him. He told the leaders the phenomenon was connected to his talent. They still hesitated because the dragon's pressure was far beyond anything the training camp normally handled. Ye Tian stepped out of their formation anyway. He stood alone beneath the white dragon. The creature descended without attacking anyone. Its blazing body transformed into energy as it entered Ye Tian. White fire flashed through his eyes again. His cultivation began rising in front of everyone. The change did not stop at an ordinary body tempering level. Energy pushed him all the way to body tempering 10th level. That realm was rare enough to be called legendary on its own. Most cultivators recognized only the normal 9 body tempering levels. Only exceptional talents ever touched the 10th. Ye Tian reached it immediately after public awakening. The city's lord watched the result and treated the SSS report with even greater seriousness. The phenomenon had provided evidence beyond any testing stone. Students below the stage could feel that Ye Tian's physical presence had changed. The instructors understood the difference more precisely. His foundation had jumped directly to the edge of becoming a true martial artist. The world beyond body tempering contained increasingly powerful realms. The martial artist realm stood first beyond body tempering. Martial general followed after the initial martial artist realm. Then came higher martial ranks that separated local experts from major national powers. City Lord Shichong himself had cultivated far enough that ordinary families viewed him as untouchable. Ye Tian's SSS talent suggested his eventual ceiling could exceed all local comparisons. Shichong praised the student for remaining calm through a phenomenon powerful enough to frighten experienced instructors. Ye Tian's attitude convinced him that talent was not the only unusual thing about the boy. The city lord immediately contacted higher authorities. An awakening this rare could not remain a training camp matter. National institutions would want to verify it. Government resources would also be necessary. If Bright City hoped to develop Ye Tian properly, Shichong asked what kind of rewards interested him most. Ye Tian did not ask for luxury housing or public honors. He asked for cultivation resources. The answer made practical sense. The reason was that every resource could accelerate the strength protecting him. She assigned Director Su before leaving to make reports. Director Su was not a ceremonial guard. He led Bright City's security bureau. His martial spirit level cultivation made him a major figure anywhere in the city. Students who knew his identity stared at the arrangement. A teenager awakened only minutes earlier now had the security director acting as a personal protector. Ye Tian accepted the help with appropriate caution. The white dragon had made him famous. It had also announced to every hostile observer that something unprecedented had appeared in Bright City. The principal later told Ye Tian that the training camp's normal reward structure was useless for this situation. Previous prizes assumed talents within familiar ranges. Nobody had prepared a package for SSS. The school would therefore coordinate with higher authorities before finalizing rewards. The principal guaranteed Ye Tian would still receive the best package in training camp history. Ye Tian cared more about the contents than the title attached to the package. He specifically wanted anything that could improve cultivation quickly. The principal also explained how SSS talent changed university admissions. Normally, students awaken their talents before anything else happened. Then they trained for the examination under ordinary progression rules. After that, they took the martial arts examination. Finally, they submitted preferences and hoped universities accepted them. Ye Tian's situation reversed the entire sequence. The strongest universities would likely approach him before the examination. He could evaluate them instead of waiting for them to evaluate him. Ye Tian immediately asked whether top university representatives would travel to Bright City. The principal said they almost certainly would. A legendary talent was too valuable for schools to negotiate through ordinary paperwork. Ye Tian liked the answer. The reason was that representatives competing face-to-face could be pushed into better offers. The principal then returned to the revenge problem. He offered to contact all three families personally. The school could demand apologies. It could push for compensation. It could also make clear that any retaliation against Ye Tian would create conflict with the training camp. Ye Tian thanked him without accepting the plan. Procedures might punish the attackers financially. They would not complete the system mission. More importantly, they would not settle the promise Ye Tian made beside the grave. He told the principal that he wanted to handle the three himself. The principal and senior staff finally understood what that meant. They had assumed Ye Tian wanted leverage for an apology. He wanted personal vengeance completed by his own decisions. Even so, the leadership did not withdraw its protection. The principal told Ye Tian the training camp would stand behind him while he handled the matter. That support came partly from justice. It also came from the practical reality that nobody wanted to become an enemy of the city's only SSS talent. Ye Tian accepted the backing, without pretending those two motives were the same. Then he walked down from the stage toward Zhang Xia. The crowd recognized his direction immediately. Conversations stopped across the crowd as Ye Tian approached. Students began moving aside to clear a path toward Zhang Xia. Zhang Xia's earlier confidence disappeared as the distance between them closed. Zhang Xia tried retreating after the first exchange. However, Ye Tian followed with a calmness that frightened the crowd more than shouting would. A second strike sent Zhang Xia into a wall, proving Ye Tian's new body tempering strength was already far beyond ordinary students. People began comparing the attack with martial artist power, even though Ye Tian had only awakened moments earlier. The instructors reached the same conclusion and quietly adjusted their estimate of what SSS potential might mean in practical combat. Zhang Xia fell back to the ground with a swollen face and finally stopped pretending. Family status made him untouchable. Ye Tian stepped onto one leg and broke it before Zhang Xia could crawl away. Then he broke the other, forcing his attacker to experience the same helplessness the buried victim had suffered earlier. Some students thought the punishment had gone too far. In parallel, others remembered the blood and clay, still covering Ye Tian's clothes. The principal staff watched closely because they expected Ye Tian to vent anger. However, still assumed he would stop before killing anyone. One dean pointed out that Zhang Xia's family contained several martial artists and could create trouble if the school allowed more. The principal answered that SSS talent changed the calculation completely. Bright City's own city lord had reached enormous power from an A-rank awakening, while Ye Tian's ceiling stood several ranks higher. Supporting Zhang Xia against that future made less sense than protecting the one talent who could eventually transform the whole city. The leaders agreed they should intervene only if Ye Tian crossed a line that threatened the training camp itself. Zhang Xia called Ye Tian a devil. During that moment, lying helpless on the ground, Ye Tian answered that the real monsters were the people who had beaten a kind classmate and buried him while he was still alive. He told Zhang Xia that this punishment was not random cruelty. However, a debt being collected for someone who never received justice. Zhang Xia finally begged for his life and claimed genuine regret. Ye Tian saw fear rather than remorse because the apology appeared only after the balance of power reversed. Zhang Xia invoked his father and uncle, reminding Ye Tian that both were martial artists who could retaliate. Ye Tian answered that nobody could save him today, then killed the first person named in the system mission. The playground went silent because most students had never seen someone die directly in front of them. Several people became sick, while others simply stared at Ye Tian, as if the familiar classmate had become someone completely different. Ye Tian turned pale too. Still, her first reaction after recovering was concern that Zhang Xia's family would come after Ye Tian. She reached for her phone to contact her father and ask for additional protection. Her friend pointed out that City Lord Shi Chong had already left a martial spirit-level bodyguard beside Ye Tian. That reminder calmed Ye Tian. That mattered because nobody, the inside, could casually threaten him with Director Su standing nearby. She also noticed that the school leadership looked shocked, still did not move to punish Ye Tian immediately. The reason was obvious to the principal, even if it made everyone uncomfortable. Zhang Xia had attempted to kill Ye Tian first, and Ye Tian now possessed a once-in-centuries talent the city could not afford to alienate. One instructor still asked whether the school should detain him for killing another student in public. The principal rejected that idea and ordered everyone to think beyond ordinary school discipline. He said Bright City might rely on Ye Tian in the future. Meanwhile, Zhang Xia had already proven himself a dangerous problem. The other leaders gradually accepted that protecting Ye Tian had become their highest strategic priority. Ye Tian himself felt unsettled for a moment because this was the first life he had ever taken personally. He did not celebrate the sensation or pretend killing felt natural, simply because the target deserved punishment. Instead, he focused on the two remaining names, and the system rewards still locked behind the mission. The principal approached with several instructors and asked where Ye Tian intended to go next. Ye Tian said he would find Wang Chong and Lu Yuan before either family could hide them or move them outside Bright City. The principal reminded him that both families were stronger than Zhang Xia's and contained multiple martial artists. Director Su's presence reduced that danger. However, Ye Tian still needed to avoid assuming one legendary talent made him invincible today. Ye Tian agreed because revenge mattered only if he survived long enough to collect every debt. Before leaving, he asked the training camp to handle Zhang Xia's body and explain the situation honestly to his family. The principal accepted the responsibility and ordered a stretcher and covering brought to the playground. After Ye Tian departed, instructors carried Zhang Xia's body toward the family's villa. The Zhang household was wealthy by ordinary Bright Sea standards and had built its business around several martial artists. Zhang Xia's father greeted the principal warmly. That mattered because he assumed a school delegation on Awakening Day meant his son had performed well. His mother shared that expectation and immediately asked what talent their son had awakened. The principal's staff exchanged uncomfortable glances before indicating the covered stretcher in the room. Zhang Xia's mother uncovered it and refused to believe the injured body belonged to her son at first. When reality settled in, grief turned immediately toward anger and demands for revenge. The principal explained that Zhang Xia and two friends had nearly killed Ye Tian, buried him alive, and returned to class as if nothing happened. Zhang Xia's father demanded to know why one student was allowed to kill another, regardless of the earlier attack. The principal then revealed the fact that changed his tone completely. Ye Tian had awakened SSS talent. At first, Zhang Xia's father assumed he had heard a rank, and still argued that money could settle the conflict. The principal corrected him to S rank, then finally repeated SSS, when the family continued misunderstanding. The room fell silent, because even martial artist families understood what that rank represented. Zhang Xia's father calculated that his own household might reach martial general at best. At the same time, Ye Tian could eventually rise far beyond Bright City. His wife's anger remained emotional. Yet he began treating open revenge as a threat to every living relative and employee they still had. The principal made no threats himself. He simply described Ye Tian's potential and allowed the family to reach its own conclusion. Zhang Xia's father then turned his anger toward the dead son, who had created an enemy no family business could afford. He publicly severed the family's connection with Zhang Xia and declared that the household would not pursue Ye Tian. His wife protested that their son was still their flesh and blood. The father answered that love did not erase responsibility for trying to murder another student for jealousy. He understood that any attempt at retaliation could eventually destroy the entire family rather than restore what they had lost. The principal asked whether they'd a message delivered to Ye Tian. Zhang Xia's father requested exactly the opposite of revenge. He wanted Ye Tian to know the family had not authorized the attack and would not become another enemy because of Zhang Xia's actions. Then he offered financial compensation for the harm Zhang Xia had caused before his death. The school leaders were surprised by how quickly the confrontation transformed into an apology. Once SSS talent entered the discussion, they accepted the compensation card on Ye Tian's behalf and left the villa without needing security intervention. Afterward, Zhang Xia's father explained privately that surviving the future mattered more than protecting the pride of someone already dead. He feared that top universities, national officials, and far stronger martial artists would soon gather around Ye Tian. A household that attacked such a person would be challenging not one teenager. Even so, the institution's betting on his future. That calculation was ruthless, but it also showed exactly why Ye Tian wanted strength in this new world. Justice followed power much more reliably when the victim possessed something society valued. Back at the training camp, Ye Tian learned that the family confrontation had ended without another fight. He asked where Wang Chong and Lu Yuan had gone, and discovered both had already left campus. The obvious assumption was that each had returned home, after realizing Ye Tian meant to complete his revenge. Ye Tian obtained their contact information and called Lu Yuan first. Lu Yuan answered, while already considering escape from the city. Ye Tian told him that hiding would only delay the inevitable, and that he would come to the Lu family if necessary. Instead of escaping farther, Lu Yuan became angry enough to reverse direction. He decided the safety of a household filled with martial artists would expose Ye Tian as reckless if he followed. Ye Tian then called Wang Chong, whose reaction was fear rather than defiance. Wang Chong understood that Zhang Xia was already dead and that he might be next. Ye Tian knew Wang Chong's address. That meant he changed direction and headed toward the Wang family residence first. Director Su followed at a distance, protecting Ye Tian without interfering in every decision. People along the road noticed the blood-covered teenager traveling with a powerful security official and began wondering what kind of background he possessed. Ye Tian ignored the attention because the system mission still showed two unfinished targets. Inside the Wang family villa, the atmosphere had already become tense before he arrived. Wang Chong's parents had prepared a celebratory meal and initially expected to hear about their son's awakening result. Wang Chong admitted that he had never completed the ceremony. The reason was that fear and chaos had prevented him from participating. His parents checked his body, found no illness, and demanded the real reason he had returned so early. Only then did Wang Chong confess that someone wanted to kill him. His mother became furious immediately and asked which family dared threaten her son. His father asked a different question first. What had Wang Chong done to create an enemy determined enough to follow him home? Wang Chong finally admitted that he, Lu Yuan, Zhang Xia had nearly killed Ye Tian and buried him alive. The confession stunned both parents. That mattered because ordinary bullying was very different from attempted murder. They immediately asked what kind of family Ye Tian came from, assuming compensation and connections could still solve the problem. Wang Chong answered that Ye Tian's household was ordinary, briefly giving them hope. Wang Chong's parents first assumed the result was B rank, which sounded impressive. Even so, still manageable through money and apologies. When he corrected them to S rank, both adults lost their relaxed expressions. Bright City had not produced an S rank awakening in years, and they understood that kind of talent could eventually create another city-level powerhouse. His parents began discussing compensation, punishment, and a formal apology before Ye Tian's influence grew any larger. They even considered beating Wang Chong themselves. Because of that, the victim could see that the family took the offense seriously. Wang Chong interrupted with one last correction. That mattered because the rumors spreading through the training camp had become impossible to hide. Ye Tian had not awakened S rank. He had awakened the legendary SSS rank. Both parents froze, checked the training camp messages themselves, and became unnaturally calm after confirming the result. The change frightened Wang Chong more than their anger had. His father suddenly addressed him by his full name and announced that the family had something important to reveal. Wang Chong was not their biological son, they claimed. However, an adopted child they had found years earlier. His mother immediately supported the story and said the connection had ended now that he was legally an adult. A household servant was told to remove Wang Chong from the residence and update every internal record possible. Wang Chong realized they were abandoning him before Ye Tian arrived. Not because they believed the adoption story mattered emotionally. They were trying to separate the entire Wang family from the revenge target. Before SSS, Talent turned one son's crime into collective disaster. He cursed them for betrayal as he was pushed outside the gate. Behind the closed doors, his parents admitted the truth to each other more plainly. Protecting Wang Chong against Ye Tian could destroy everyone else in the family. Neither adult wanted their businesses, relatives, and other children sacrificed for someone who had helped bury a classmate alive. Outside, Wang Chong's fear transformed back into rage. This was because anger was easier to endure than abandonment. He shouted Ye Tian's name and blamed him for losing his family. Ye Tian answered from nearby that Wang Chong's own actions had created the result. Wang Chong rushed at him, despite knowing the difference in strength. Ye Tian caught the first punch easily and crushed the attack before Wang Chong could build momentum. Then he broke both of Wang Chong's legs, leaving him unable to flee back toward the closed family gate. Wang Chong screamed for his parents. Still, nobody inside opened the door. The family sent only a spoken message saying they knew nothing about his conflict and would not interfere with Ye Tian. Ye Tian dragged Wang Chong away from the villa. At the same time, Director Su followed, and the household remained silent. Instead of choosing a random place, Ye Tian returned to the same wilderness pit, where the original body had been buried. The area looked different now. The cause was simple. Powerful people had already searched around the White Dragon phenomenon for non-existent treasure. Fresh digging marks covered the ground. However, Ye Tian still recognized the exact place from the body's memories. He asked Wang Chong whether he remembered burying someone there and leaving without checking whether the victim truly died. Wang Chong finally begged without pride, admitting that the three had treated the killing like entertainment. He even confessed that they had discussed hurting more ordinary students after believing they escaped consequences. Ye Tian saw no reason to interpret those words as repentance. He killed Wang Chong at the burial site and returned the body to the earth, where the previous Ye Tian had been left. The system confirmed the second revenge target was dead. One name remained, Lu Yuan. The Lu family was wealthier and more politically connected than either household Ye Tian had confronted earlier. Its business interests reached the Bright City Chamber of Commerce, and more than 10 martial artists belonged to the extended family. Lu Yuan had already reached home and found his father waiting with a much harsher response than expected. Rather than preparing protection, the older man was beating his son for creating a crisis involving Ye Tian. Lu Yuan begged for help, meanwhile insisting the burial should have worked, and Ye Tian should have died. That statement made his father even angrier because it confirmed the attack had been intentional rather than a school fight gone wrong. He demanded to know why his son had antagonized someone capable of returning from near death and awakening legendary talent. Lu Yuan tried hiding behind the belief that Ye Tian had been an ordinary student when the attack happened. His father answered that arrogance toward ordinary people was exactly how families created enemies they could not predict. The beating became so severe that Lu Yuan's condition deteriorated even before Ye Tian reached the residence. A servant then reported that Director Su had arrived with Ye Tian. Lu Yuan's father immediately understood that negotiation had become the only reasonable option. He ordered his injured son to remain visible and welcomed the visitors into the family hall. Director Su explained that he was only accompanying Ye Tian and would not negotiate the revenge on his behalf. Lu Yuan's father apologized for his son's actions and claimed the family had never known about the burial plan. He offered money and compensation if Ye Tian would leave Lu Yuan alive. Ye Tian answered that compensation and surrender were separate matters. The father tried reminding him that the Lu family had more than 10 martial artists and strong commercial connections. Ye Tian responded with 4 words that ended every comparison. He had awakened SSS talent. The father mentioned a powerful relative elsewhere in Nanjing province. Ye Tian repeated the same answer. He mentioned a niece studying under a martial emperor-level figure at a famous university. Ye Tian repeated that he had awakened SSS talent again. Director Su watched the exchange and understood that every family advantage sounded temporary beside a once-in-centuries awakening. Lu Yuan's father finally stopped listing connections and allowed Ye Tian to take his son away. He asked only that Ye Tian remember the wider Lu family had not participated in the original crime. Ye Tian agreed to separate Lu Yuan's actions from relatives who did not attack him. Yet he still demanded compensation later. Then he grabbed the badly injured Lu Yuan and left the residence. The final revenge ended unexpectedly before Ye Tian returned to the burial pit. Lu Yuan had been beaten. Because of that, badly by his own father, that he died from those injuries during the journey. Ye Tian looked down at the body and understood that the system cared about the mission result more than the exact final strike. A notification confirmed all 3 people responsible for the original body's burial were now dead. The 1-star revenge mission closed immediately. Its promised reward unlocked 100 times cultivation speed. At the same moment, the system opened Ye Tian's personal attribute panel for the first time. The display showed him at body tempering 10th level, with Raging Divine Flame recorded as an SSS talent. It also revealed 10 units of primordial energy already inside his body. This world's cultivation system treated primordial energy as both physical and mental foundation, rather than a decorative number. 1 unit corresponded to roughly 60 kilograms of force, along with a similar measurable increase in mental power. Ye Tian's 10 units therefore gave him around 600 kilograms of physical force before becoming a true martial artist. Ordinary people below the martial artist threshold normally capped around half that amount. The difference explained why his attacks at the training camp had looked far beyond normal body tempering strength. To advance further, cultivators absorbed primordial energy from special stones. 1 primordial stone cost an amount that ordinary workers might need years to save. Even trained martial artists could spend months absorbing the energy from a single stone under normal conditions. Ye Tian's new 100 times cultivation speed changed the economics completely. Resources that others processed slowly could become immediate strength in his hands. Director Su asked whether completing the revenge had finally removed the resentment carried by the original body. Ye Tian answered that the anger had settled, now that all 3 debts were finished. Director Su said resolving that obsession would help prevent future cultivation from being disturbed by unresolved hatred. He also gave Ye Tian a more practical warning about what came next. The fact that 3 families had backed down did not mean Ye Tian was currently stronger than every powerful household. They surrendered because his talent promised an extraordinary future, and the reason was that institutions had already begun protecting that future. Children from top families started cultivating years earlier with resources ordinary students could barely imagine. Many national geniuses already possessed more than a decade of accumulated training before reaching university age. Ye Tian's SSS ceiling surpassed theirs. Still, his present strength still needed time and resources to catch up. Director Su told him not to mistake future potential for current invincibility. Ye Tian agreed, then asked about the financial compensation collected from the first 2 families. Director Su produced 2 gold cards, containing a total of 2 million local currency. Ye Tian refused to spend the money on comfort and asked whether it could be exchanged directly for primordial stones. The request impressed Director Su. The reason was that most teenagers would have been distracted by sudden wealth after growing up poor. 2 million could purchase roughly 10 stones at current prices. Director Su warned that even 1 stone normally took an extremely long time to absorb. Ye Tian simply answered that his situation was different and asked him to arrange the exchange anyway. Director Su hesitated because Ye Tian was not yet a martial artist. However, the confidence behind the request made him agree. Ye Tian also reminded him that the Liu family still owed compensation after surrendering Liu Yuan. Director Su promised to contact them and then followed Ye Tian toward the modest rental building where he lived. The security bureau chief frowned when he saw how little space the city's newest SSS talent actually possessed. Ye Tian explained that his parents were ordinary workers and had never had the money to provide cultivation resources. Director Su understood that Ye Tian's extraordinary future had begun without the childhood advantages enjoyed by wealthy martial families. He reported the situation upward, while Ye Tian finally washed away the blood and mud from Awakening Day. Fresh clothes made him look like the student everyone remembered instead of someone who had just climbed from a grave. Director Su exchanged the first compensation money for primordial stones and delivered the fist-sized resources that evening. Ye Tian selected 1 stone and activated his newly unlocked cultivation speed reward. Small energy whirlpools formed around him as primordial power entered his body, at a rate Director Su would have considered impossible. The entire stone turned to powder after an absorption process that should have taken an ordinary cultivator far longer. Ye Tian checked the attribute panel and saw his primordial energy increase immediately. That confirmed the 100 times reward was not a vague bonus. Even so, a practical engine for converting money into strength. His body already carried twice the normal power, expected below the martial artist threshold. Every additional stone would widen that gap until a true breakthrough became possible. News of Ye Tian's SSS awakening spread through Bright City. Meanwhile, he remained inside the rental room cultivating. At the Lu residence, Lu Yuan's mother still could not accept that her son had been taken away and died. She accused her husband of cowardice for allowing Ye Tian to leave with him. The father repeated the same answer every time she listed another family advantage. Ye Tian had awakened SSS talent. She mentioned the household's martial artists. Ye Tian repeated the same answer about his SSS talent. She mentioned their wealth and commercial position. He repeated SSS talent again. She argued that allowing Ye Tian to take Lu Yuan humiliated the entire family. Her husband answered that Lu Yuan had used background to bully someone weaker first. That meant the reversal was hardly mysterious. When she suggested killing Ye Tian, the discussion stopped being emotional and became a survival calculation. The father explained that top universities and powerful national figures would soon fight to recruit the legendary talent. Attacking Ye Tian now could bring destruction onto the Lu household before revenge achieved anything. He asked whether one dead son was worth risking every living member of the family. His wife finally understood the scale of the threat and abandoned the idea of retaliation. The couple decided to send another large compensation payment and focus on preventing Ye Tian from viewing the wider family as enemies. Their strange conclusion was that Lu Yuan's habit of creating trouble had ultimately caused his own death. The next morning, Ye Tian had already used a full night of cultivation. Rather than celebrating his revenge, Director Su arranged expensive beast meat for breakfast. The cause was simple. High-energy food helped cultivators recover from demanding training. Even 1 kilogram cost more than many ordinary workers could comfortably spend. Ye Tian's body absorbed the meal easily, reinforcing how quickly his daily life was leaving normal student standards behind. Director Su then began explaining the National Martial Arts University system Ye Tian would soon have to navigate. China contained thousands of martial arts universities. Still, only a small group sat at the very top. 5 institutions shared the highest national prestige and competed constantly for the best young talent. They were Imperial Capital, Magic Capital, Nanjing Hongha, and Jiantian Martial Arts University. Admission for ordinary applicants required excellent talent, plus an extremely high martial arts examination score. In Bright City, only a tiny number of students each year could realistically satisfy those thresholds. Ye Tian's A-rank awakening placed her among that group even before exam results were known. For Ye Tian, however, the normal entrance requirements had become almost irrelevant. Director Su expected the universities to evaluate his SSS talent directly rather than wait for the national exam. Ye Tian asked how quickly students from elite families normally advanced after awakening. Director Su explained that well-funded geniuses often started preparing years earlier and could reach martial artist far sooner than ordinary people. Even then, crossing from awakener to martial artist usually demanded significant time, resources, and a stable cultivation foundation. Yates listened while continuing to absorb primordial stones with the new speed reward. His goal was not merely to enter a famous university. Still, to arrive strong enough that schools would negotiate from a position of urgency. Director Su told him the smartest strategy was to let multiple universities gather and then compare their offers. Ye Tian agreed immediately because competition meant better techniques, more money, and more cultivation resources. 2 days passed after the awakening, while Bright City's attention around Ye Tian kept growing. Director Su received messages that representatives from several of the country's top universities were already traveling toward the city. Before the meeting happened, he visited Ye Tian's room and sensed something different the moment the door opened. Ye Tian's aura was no longer at body tempering 10th level. The primordial stones and 100 times cultivation speed had pushed him across the barrier into true martial artist. Director Su stared because only a few days had passed since the awakening ceremony. He checked again to make sure the pressure was not some unusual side effect of Raging Divine Flame. The answer remained the same. Ye Tian had gone from newly awakened student to martial artist in roughly 3 days. Director Su said even national geniuses usually measured that transition in years rather than days. The fastest record he knew was still enormously slower than what Ye Tian had just accomplished. Ye Tian treated the breakthrough as expected. This was because the system reward had been designed to accelerate cultivation. Director Su interpreted it differently, seeing another reason the top universities would become desperate once the result was confirmed. If SSS talent already gave Ye Tian an unmatched ceiling, This cultivation speed made the gap feel even more dangerous. He warned Ye Tian that public attention would increase sharply after university representatives learned about the breakthrough. Ye Tian answered that attention was useful as long as it came with resources and protection. Director Su confirmed 4 representatives had arrived from the top group of schools. Imperial Capital, Magic Capital, Hongha, and Jiantian had all sent powerful recruiters. Nanjing Martial Arts University was the strange exception. The reason was that no representative had appeared, despite Bright City belonging to Nanjing Province. Ye Tian found that absence curious, but decided there was no reason to chase a school that had not come to him. Director Su advised him to ask every recruiter for the highest possible offer rather than accept polite opening terms. He also suggested requesting stronger personal protection. The cause was simple. Ye Tian's photo and public identity would soon circulate far beyond the training camp. Ye Tian thanked him sincerely for the guidance. Then he joked that his next bodyguard should preferably be strong, gentle, attractive, and obedient. Director Su stared at him long enough for Ye Tian to wave away the request as something he could ask the higher-ups later. The light moment ended when Director Su suddenly sensed danger outside the rental room. He grabbed Ye Tian and broke through the window without taking time to explain. An explosion destroyed the room behind them almost immediately. The attacker was far stronger than any student enemy Ye Tian had faced during the revenge mission. A figure wrapped in cold black mist appeared in front of them and struck Director Su hard enough to make the martial spirit level protector bleed. Director Su prepared to tell Ye Tian to run. The reason was that protecting one student from this opponent exceeded the plan they had been given. Ye Tian noticed something else before panic could take control. The attacker had likely never seen his face. More importantly, public information still listed Ye Tian at body tempering 10th level rather than martial artist. He turned that gap in information into the only defense available. Instead of answering like the target, Ye Tian loudly called Director Su his uncle and acted shocked that someone had destroyed another person's house. The Black Mist attacker hesitated because the behavior did not match a terrified student being hunted. When asked directly, Ye Tian claimed he was an education official looking for Ye Tian after hearing the student had already gone to school. The attacker sensed martial artist cultivation from him and became even less suspicious. The real Ye Tian was supposedly still at body tempering 10th level according to the latest intelligence. After studying him briefly, the attacker decided the young martial artist could not be the person he came to kill. Then the Black Mist figure disappeared to continue searching elsewhere. Ye Tian shouted after him to pay for the destroyed rental room, maintaining the act until the danger was completely gone. Only then did he sit down, drenched in sweat from a gamble that could have ended instantly if the enemy knew his appearance. Director Su returned and praised Ye Tian for staying mentally clear. During that moment, facing an opponent strong enough to overpower his assigned bodyguard, Ye Tian admitted the trick succeeded only because his cultivation had advanced faster than the assassin's information. Director Su agreed. The bluff had been a gamble and warned that future enemies would eventually obtain Ye Tianxin's face and updated cultivation. That made stronger protection more urgent than ever, especially now that someone had already tried to kill him before university recruitment finished. Ye Tian repeated his request for a better bodyguard, earning another exhausted look from Director Su. Then the two headed toward the first training camp. The cause was simple. 4 top university representatives were already waiting. By this point, Bright City was talking about Ye Tian almost continuously. Ordinary residents repeated the story of a blood-covered student making an awakening stone explode before revealing legendary SSS talent. Others exaggerated the rumors, mixing his relationship with Ye Tian into increasingly ridiculous versions of why he had appeared covered in blood. Some believed 3 jealous admirers attacked him because Ye Tian liked Ye Tian instead of them. Others invented romantic stories that had nothing to do with the burial, proving how quickly public attention distorted real events. Ye Tian ignored the gossip and chose the training camp's main gate rather than entering quietly through the back. Director Su recommended caution, but Ye Tian disliked acting like a fugitive after surviving an assassination attempt he had not caused. Inside the camp's most luxurious office, 4 university representatives were already waiting with the principal and senior staff. Hongha Martial Arts University sent a huge, rough-looking recruiter named Zhang Kuwang. Imperial Capital sent Li Rushing, a composed man dressed in a traditional long robe. Magic Capital sent Yu Jiang, a sharp professional woman wearing glasses. Ye Tian sent Chu Loli, a much smaller woman carrying an oversized iron hammer that made her appearance difficult to ignore. All four had cultivation strong enough that the training camp's leaders treated them with unusual restraint. The recruiters immediately noticed one missing competitor. Nanjing Martial Arts University, one of the 5 highest-ranked institutions, had not sent anyone, despite Bright City belonging to its province. Nobody understood the absence, and even the other universities found it strange. The cause was simple. Nanjing normally fought aggressively for talent. Chu Loli joked that fewer competitors simply improved everyone else's chances. The recruiters were more skeptical about Ye Tian himself than the principal expected. An SSS awakening had not appeared for centuries. That meant none of them wanted to trust one local training camp's report without personal verification. Chu Loli solved the argument by producing her own high-grade awakening stone from a storage ring. The other 3 agreed that Ye Tian should test again in front of them. They also discussed his reported body tempering, 10th level, and wondered whether the city's information had been exaggerated. Each university declared that genuine SSS talent would justify extraordinary recruitment treatment. Magic Capital promised rapid advancement. Manhwa said it would pay the highest possible cost to secure him. Imperial Capital claimed it would meet whatever conditions were necessary. Ye Tian made it clear that it intended to fight just as hard instead of surrendering a legendary talent to richer schools. The principal cared less about which university won than the fact that 4 national powers had entered his office for one student. A knock finally interrupted the discussion. Ye Tian entered with Director Su behind him. At the same time, the principal personally opened the door. The recruiters immediately sensed that something in the latest report was already outdated. Ye Tian was no longer at body tempering 10th level. His aura clearly belonged to a martial artist. The principal, dean, instructors, and recruiters all reacted at once. This was because only 3 days had passed since the original awakening. Ye Tian casually said he had gained some cultivations, insight, and been fortunate. Nobody in the room believed ordinary luck explained that speed. The training camp staff assumed it represented the monstrous potential of SSS talent. The university representatives were less willing to accept the explanation. This was because they knew the strongest national cultivation records. Even elite geniuses with great families required far longer to cross the barrier Ye Tian had just passed. Their skepticism about his awakening result increased rather than disappeared. At almost the same time elsewhere, the Black Mist attacker who had destroyed Ye Tian's room encountered an even more frightening presence. The powerful demon who had overwhelmed Director Su was forced to kneel before a veiled woman in white gauze. Her aura was so deep that even the assassin begged for mercy, rather than attempting resistance. She ordered him to return with a message for the demoness behind the assassination. Ye Tian was not to be touched. The woman claimed Ye Tian as someone under her protection, revealing that unseen forces were already moving around him. Back in the training camp office, none of the recruiters knew about that hidden intervention. Li Rushing politely admitted that the university still had doubts about an SSS awakening reported by a local device. Yu Zhang asked Ye Tian to test publicly on the stone Chu Loli had brought. Ye Tian understood the skepticism and agreed without taking offense. He pointed to the large device and confirmed they wanted him to use that exact stone. All 4 representatives answered immediately. The cause was simple. None wanted any later excuse about equipment quality. Ye Tian placed his hand on the testing surface. A brilliant white light flooded the office. Before the awakening stone displayed one light after another. All 10 positions activated across the awakening stone at once. Raging Divine Flame appeared again beside the result. Zhang Kuwang cursed in shock before remembering he was supposed to behave like a national university representative. Li Rushing lost his composed expression too. Yu Zhang stared so hard through her glasses that the principal almost found the reaction funny. Chu Loli's twin ponytails shook as she confirmed the full 10-light result. The 4 recruiters had come prepared to verify a rumor and instead confirmed the rarest talent any of them had ever seen. The principal exchanged satisfied glances with his staff because the outsiders now looked exactly like the people they had doubted earlier. Each recruiter took photographs of Ye Tian, the Awakening Stone, and the Raging Divine Flame result. They sent the evidence directly to university leadership before continuing any negotiations. Replies arrived almost instantly from the 4 university leadership teams. Imperial Capital ordered its representative to meet Ye Tian's conditions and bring him into the school. Manhwa authorized benefits far beyond normal recruitment packages. Magic Capital told Yu Jing to use every reasonable method available and promised her promotion for success. Jianqian demanded that Chu Loli spare no cost if necessary to secure Ye Tian. The atmosphere in the office changed completely after those messages. Minutes earlier, the recruiters had been evaluating whether Ye Tian's result was real. Now they were studying one another as competitors who might lose a once-in-century student. Their intense attention made Ye Tian instinctively step back half a pace. Chu Loli moved first by bowing and apologizing for doubting him. The other three immediately copied her, rather than allow Jiantian to gain a reputation advantage. Training camp leaders were stunned. The cause was simple. People vastly stronger than them were apologizing publicly to a student. Ye Tian waved away the issue and said verification had been reasonable, given how unbelievable SSS talent sounded. That response improved the recruiter's opinion of him. This was because he showed confidence without wasting time demanding humiliation. He had already taken revenge on the people who tried to kill him and had no interest in manufacturing enemies over professional caution. Ye Tian then moved directly to the subject he cared about. He asked the 4 universities to state their offers. The better the resources, the more seriously he would consider the school. Every recruiter understood that politeness had ended, and the real competition was about to begin. Zhang Kuwang from Manhwa moved first. The cause was simple. Hesitation would only give the other schools an opening. He offered Ye Tian an A-rank combat technique, plus 20 million in cash for joining Manhwa. The training camp leaders reacted immediately. This was because that package already exceeded what last year's provincial champion had received. Bright City belonged to Nanjing province, where thousands of candidates competed for recognition across many cities. Last year's provincial top scorer had entered Manhwa with a smaller payment and only a B-rank technique. Ye Tian has not even taken the Nan National Martial Arts examination yet. However, his opening offer already surpassed that precedent. He stayed silent because accepting first prize would waste the competition Director Su had specifically told him to create. Li Rushing from Imperial Capital criticized Manhwa's offer as too cautious for a once-in-centuries talent. Zhang Kuwang fired back by reminding him of the previous inter-university martial arts tournament. The recruiters began arguing about school prestige before returning to the person whose signature actually mattered. Imperial Capital raised the offer to an A-rank combat technique and 30 million. Yu Zhang from Magic Capital immediately said that package still undervalued Ye Tian. Magic Capital offered the same A-rank technique with 50 million in cash. The principal almost stopped, pretending to remain calm. The reason was that already exceeded the package given to last year's national top scorer. A student who had been buried alive 3 days earlier was now worth more than the country's previous examination champion. Chu Loli waited until the other offers were visible before revealing Jiantian's bid. Jiantian offered an A-rank combat technique, an additional B-rank technique, and 50 million. The other recruiters fell quiet because Jiantian had a reputation for being conservative with resources. Its decision to outbid everyone proved that Ye Tian's value had broken normal recruitment rules. Training camp leaders whispered that ordinary people could work several lifetimes without accumulating comparable wealth or techniques. Ye Tian heard the numbers without changing expression. The cause was simple. Money alone was not the only measure of long-term cultivation value. He asked the 4 representatives a broader question before choosing any offer. How did they compare him with the National Martial Arts Examination top scorer? Li Rushing answered by explaining why raw exam rankings could be misleading at the highest level. China's great martial families gave their children resources, instruction, and early awakenings, long before ordinary students gained access. Some heirs started cultivating 6 or 7 years earlier than their peers. Others began even younger and entered examination age with enormous built-in advantages. Military geniuses could receive similar support through elite training systems. By the time those candidates formally entered university, some were already martial artists. A small number could even reach martial general before ordinary students finished basic preparation. The recruiters, therefore, warned Ye Tian not to assume his current martial artist cultivation automatically made him stronger than every national genius. Ye Tian accepted the comparison. That mattered because Director Su had already given him the same warning about accumulated foundations. Then he asked the question that mattered more to his bargaining position. Had any of those geniuses crossed from newly awakened student to martial artist in 3 days? All 4 recruiters shook their heads. Li Rushing said the fastest transformation he knew had still taken about a year. That record belonged to an imperial capital genius and had been celebrated nationally. Ye Tian told them. The new record was standing directly in front of them. The recruiters looked toward the principal and Director Su rather than accepting the statement immediately. Training camp leaders confirmed that Ye Tian had awakened only 3 days earlier. Director Su confirmed that he personally sensed Ye Tian at body tempering 10th level before the breakthrough. Now there was no doubt Ye Tian had compressed a process measured in years into days. The four recruiters became quieter. This was because SSS talent alone had already justified their extraordinary offers. Adding cultivation speed changed the ceiling of every projection they had made before entering Bright's city. Ye Tian then pushed the comparison one step further. The National Martial Arts Examination produced a top scorer every single year. The recruiters agreed because one candidate always finished first. Ye Tian asked how often someone awakened SSS talent. Nobody answered immediately, because the comparison had suddenly become uncomfortable. Centuries could pass without another person receiving the rank displayed on the stone beside them. That meant comparing Ye Tian's recruitment package to an annual champion was using the wrong benchmark entirely. His value was not simply higher than last year's top scorer. There was no recent SSS precedent for the universities to use. The four representatives understood that Ye Tian was asking them to price scarcity, future ceiling, and unprecedented cultivation speed together. Every earlier offer suddenly looked like an opening bid rather than a final package. The principal watched their expressions and realized the real negotiation had only just begun. Ye Tian had entered the office as a student being recruited. Within minutes, he had turned the universities into competing buyers, trying to justify why their resources deserved him. The missing Nanjiang representative remained an unanswered question in the background. The Blackmist assassin also remained somewhere beyond the school, unaware that another mysterious powerhouse had already warned his side away. Ye Tian's remained outside the negotiation, still unaware of how far Ye Tian's future had moved beyond normal Bright City expectations. Director Su stayed nearby because the assassination attempt proved recruitment attention had already created real danger. Ye Tian himself focused on only a few concrete priorities. He wanted combat techniques strong enough to match Raging Divine Flame. He wanted money that could be converted into primordial stones. He wanted protection until his present strength caught up with his talent. Most of all, he wanted cultivation resources that would exploit the 100 times speed unlocked by revenge. The 3 deaths had closed the first system mission. They had also removed the obsession inherited from the body Ye Tian entered. Now, the same system reward had already carried him into the martial artist realm. The white fire dragon that healed him in the grave was no longer merely a miraculous awakening image. It was becoming the foundation of a cultivation's path powerful institutions were willing to fight over. 3 days earlier, Zhang Xia, Wang Chong, and Lu Yuan had treated Ye Tian as someone with no family backing. Their entire plan depended on the belief that an ordinary student could disappear without meaningful consequences. That assumption collapsed the moment Ye Tian returned from the grave. The system gave him survival. Raging Divine Flame gave him public value. Revenge unlocked the cultivation speed that turned that value into immediate strength. Director Su's protection showed how quickly institutions began investing in him once the talent became known. The assassin showed the opposite side of the same reality. The stronger Ye Tian's future looked, the more dangerous the people trying to remove him would become. That was why university resources mattered beyond money or prestige. The next school he chose could determine the quality of techniques, teachers, protection, and cultivation support surrounding him. Ye Tian refused to choose based on excitement alone. He had built an empire in his previous life and understood that negotiations improved when every bidder feared losing the deal. The recruiters were already competing harder than they had expected when they entered Bright City. Their first packages had exceeded provincial and national precedents. Ye Tian's final question forced them to recognize those precedents were not enough. A national champion appeared every year. An SSS talent might not appear once in several centuries. The difference left all 4 recruiters staring at him without an immediate response. None could honestly claim an annual top scorer represented a fair comparison anymore. The office fell into a tense silence as each representative recalculated what Ye Tian might actually be worth. No university had won yet. No final contract had been signed, and Ye Tian had no reason to rush. In parallel, 4 national powers were still deciding how much higher they could go. No recruiter had secured Ye Tian's answer before the discussion reached its natural pause. Ye Tian remained uncommitted, as all four schools reconsidered what an SSS talent with unprecedented cultivation speed was worth.